Welcome to 21st Sports recap and reaction for the Green Bay Packers at the Arizona Cardinals in their Week 16 matchup played December 27th, 2015. We're going to go over the scores and the stats and give our breakdown and analysis for what could be a possible playoff preview, as right now the Cardinals are the number 2 seed and the Packers needed to win this game to keep pace for the division title in the North, with the Vikings nipping at their heels. But to start this thing off, it was scoreless through the first quarter, as it was a tight game early on, but then the Cardinals went off, and they would end up scoring 31 straight points. They put up 17 before halftime, starting off with a 3-yard touchdown from Carson Palmer to Larry Fitzgerald just less than a minute into the second quarter, and with the extra point by Chandler Catanzaro, it was 7-0 Arizona over Green Bay. Then with less than 6 minutes still left in the first half, Chandler Catanzaro hit a 19-yard field goal to make it 10-0 Cardinals over the Packers. Then we saw a couple of interceptions in the final 2 minutes, as first Palmer was intercepted by Daniels right at the 2-minute warning, and then the Packers, after getting that interception, which put them on the Arizona 15, they were faced with a 3rd and 5 from the 10, and Rodgers was intercepted by Justin Bethel, and so now the Cardinals would take over with less than a minute left before halftime, and they went right down the field, and on 3rd and goal from the 7, Carson Palmer hit John Brown for a 7-yard touchdown. Catanzaro added the extra point, and it was now 17-0 with the Cardinals in the lead decisively at halftime. Then in the third quarter, the Packers would get the ball first, and on their first play of the second half, it was a fumble. Starks got blown up by Swearinger. Powers recovered, and now Arizona would take over at the Green Bay 28. Palmer went to Floyd for a 14-yard pass, and on 1st and goal from the 14 in the red zone, they give it to David Johnson, and he runs it 14 yards for the touchdown. Catanzaro adds the extra point, and it was now 24-0 Arizona over Green Bay. The Packers now would take over on their own 9-yard line after the kickoff. They got backed up to the 2 when on 2nd down, Freeney sacked Rodgers for an 8-yard loss, but then they got the ball out to the 35, due in part to a penalty, and they started moving the ball. They got into Arizona territory, but on 3rd and 7 from the 49, Corey Redding scoops up the fumble and runs it into the end zone, 36 yards for the touchdown. Catanzaro adds the extra point, and it was now 31-0 Cardinals over the Packers, with 9.5 still left in the third, as the Cardinals had scored 31 straight points before the Packers had even put a point on the board. So now the Packers would finally respond with their next possession, as they started off on their own 20 after the touchback on the kickoff, and they got down into Arizona territory, and on 2nd and 10 from the 28, Eddie Lacy would take it into the end zone after catching a pass from Rodgers, the 28-yard touchdown, and then they went for 2, and Rodgers hit James Jones for the successful 2-point conversion, and it was now 31-8. And now the Cardinals would go 3 and out on their next possession, and then Green Bay, after having scored their first points on the previous possession and forcing the 3 and out, they would now take over after the punt on their own 11-yard line. And they picked up a first down, but then on 2nd and 10, Rodgers was sacked by Rucker for an 8-yard loss that made it 3rd and 18 from the 18. And now Gerard Powers would scoop up a fumble and run it into the end zone, 7 yards for the touchdown. Chandler Catanzaro added the extra point, and it was now 38-8 as the Cardinals extended their lead to 30 points with 3 minutes left in the third. And that would end up doing it for the scoring. The Packers would end up turning the ball over on downs on their next possession. Both teams traded punts. The Cardinals would end up fumbling the ball in the fourth quarter, but the Packers didn't turn into any points, and they would go 3 and out on their final possession, and the Cardinals would bring this game to a close as they win this one 38-8. They score 28 points off of turnovers. So they ended up with a couple of defensive touchdowns. And the Cardinals now 13-2 with the win. And so they keep the pressure on Carolina for home field advantage in the playoffs. They still have a shot at taking home field advantage. Of course, they have clinched the West, and they've clinched a first round bye. And now they're 6-1 at home. They'll be finishing up there in Arizona in week 17. But the Packers now 10-5 on the season, and they've just put themselves in kind of a precarious position. Be seeing what happens with the Vikings against the Giants on Sunday Night Football. If the Vikings win that one, then they would be tied, as the Packers had a chance to keep that one-game lead over Minnesota, but now they're just a half a game above the Vikings. Like I said, the Vikings are playing tonight, Sunday Night Football. This will be interesting to see what happens in that game. And next week, week 17, the Packers will be facing the Vikings. So regardless, it's going to come down to that final game for the Packers and the Vikings, with the division title on the line from the looks of it. But the Cardinals, they do themselves a favor, and they get a very impressive victory in this game. A huge win against another playoff team, and that's very impressive for them to win in this fashion against the Packers, especially the way their defense played. They had 9 sacks in this game. They said they were just 28 points off of the turnovers. They were just really putting the beating on the Packers in this one, as they won very decisively. And Carson Palmer, he was 18 for 27 in this game, 265 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. And then Williams, 8 carries for 44 yards. Ellington, 7 carries for 40 yards. And David Johnson, the rookie, 9 carries for 39 yards and a touchdown. And Floyd had 6 catches for 111 yards for Michael Floyd. Johnson also had 3 catches for 88 yards in this game, as he ended up with 137 yards in this game. And Larry Fitzgerald, 4 catches for 29 yards, also had a touchdown. John Brown, 3 catches for 25 yards and a touchdown. Aaron Rodgers was 15 for 28 with 151 total passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. He also had 19 yards on the ground off of 3 carries. Eddie Lacy had 12 carries for 60 yards in this game. Lacy also had 1 catch for 28 yards, giving him 88 total yards. He had a receiving touchdown. And James Jones had 5 catches for 46 yards. Devontae Adams had 3 catches for 42 yards. Look at the kickers in this game. Chandler Catanzaro was perfect, 1 for 1 on the field goals, 5 for 5 on the extra points. And Green Bay did not attempt a kick, not an extra point, not a field goal by Mason Crosby. He just sat on the sidelines for this entire game. Look at the defense for the Cardinals. Calais Campbell had 2.5 sacks. Dwight Freeney had 3 sacks. Deion Buchanan had a sack and a forced fumble. Freeney also had a forced fumble as well. Martin had a sack and a forced fumble. Justin Bethel had an interception. Golden had a half a sack. Frosty Rucker had a sack. Swearinger had a forced fumble. As their defense was very busy, really putting the pressure on the Packers, shutting them down. And then for Green Bay, Pennell had a sack and a forced fumble, and Daniels had an interception, and Neal had a sack as well. Look at the team stats: 19 first downs for the Cards, 16 for the Pack. And on third down, Arizona 5 for 10, 50% conversion rate. In Green Bay, just 5 of 17, 29% on third down. They did go for it 3 times on fourth down. They made it twice for 66% for Green Bay on fourth. Then we look at total net yards: 381 for Arizona, 178 for Green Bay. On the ground, the Cards netted 121, the Pack 101. Then we look through the air: Arizona 260, Palmer sacked twice for a loss of 9 yards. The Packers netted just 77 yards through the air in this game, as Rodgers was sacked 9 times losing a total of 78 yards. Talk about under pressure. And a lot of penalties in the game, but they didn't affect the Cardinals as they really ran away with this one. But 10 penalties, 119 yards against the Cards. 7 penalties for 59 yards against the Pack. A lot of fumbles, too. 5 fumbles for Green Bay. They recovered 2, lost 3. 2 fumbles for the Cardinals. They lost 1, recovered 1. And in the red zone in this game, the Cardinals 3 for 4, 75%. 0 for 2 for Green Bay in the red zone. In the time of possession, 30 minutes, 16 seconds for the Cardinals, 29 minutes, 44 seconds for the Packers. The Cardinals just totally dominated this game on both sides of the ball, especially up front in their trenches. They really had an incredible pass rush. I mean, they were all over Aaron Rodgers, and they were really showing the rest of the league, what they can do. This was a statement game, if I ever saw one, is they really are putting a scare into a lot of these teams. Is after seeing what they just did to the Packers, that's going to keep some of these offensive coordinators and offensive line coaches up late at night and having nightmares going into the playoffs, having to face the Cardinals in Arizona nonetheless. As when they're at home, they are a tough team. They're a tough team regardless, as they've been one of the best teams over the last couple of years. Of course, they narrowly missed the playoffs last year, but they are not missing the playoffs this year, as they are red hot coming down the stretch here. And we'll see what happens next week. But if they keep on winning, it's going to be tough for any team to stop them. It's going to be quite the interesting playoffs, as there's a lot of good teams heading into the playoffs, but Arizona is really looking strong. They are looking like quite the juggernaut on both sides of the ball. Is again Carson Palmer a couple more touchdowns, as he's having an incredible year, but the defense really making a huge statement in this game, and the Packers just really could not get anything going on offense, as they were almost shut out in this game. They had that one touchdown in the third quarter, and that would be it. Other than that, the Cardinals just totally dominate in this one. Of course, jumping out to that 31-0 lead, and then they finished out strong. Of course, no teams. That was the thing that was interesting, is both the first and fourth quarters were scoreless. So bookend scoreless quarters. All that scoring done in the second and third. But let me know what you think about this game in the comment section below. Definitely interested to read your thoughts and opinions. Thank you very much for listening. It's greatly appreciated. I hope you're having a good day and having a great week and a great weekend and enjoying all the sports.